Does anyone else think that episode 8 should have been the premiere for season 2? When watching this episode, it definitely felt like that. We do learn who Sauron is in this episode, assuming you haven't already guessed, as well as the identity of the stranger. But we're going to talk about Numenor first because it's the shortest part of the episode. When the part of the expeditionary force that included Elendil and Miriel sailed back to Numenor, the two characters share a moment where they seem to embrace their destiny as members of the Faithful, which is the group that still held to the old ways, as well as the friendship with the elves. But when they reach Numenor, Elendil sees the black flags that signify the death of King Tar-Palantir, who is the father of Miriel. However, just before he died, he opened the door to the Palantir chamber to Eärien, thinking that it was his daughter Miriel. It's presumed that she's going to look into it, but we don't see it happen. So yeah, that was pretty quick. Moving on to the Harfoot story, which, God, there was a part towards the end that I just had to skip through because it was going on way too long. But the priestesses did catch up to the stranger, and they tell him that he's Sauron, and that once he travels with them to the land of Rhûn, he will regain his full faculties. And they keep calling him Sauron over and over again. And they're not doing it to trick him. They honestly believe that he's Sauron, and remember, he has no idea who he is either. But the priestesses are both in awe of and afraid of his power. At this point, the Harfoots try to stage a rescue, but it turns out to be a trap, and Sadek Burrows, the trail finder, is killed. Now, seeing his friends in danger seems to help the stranger regain some of his mind, and he tries to fight the priestesses, but the Eminem-looking one uses her magic staff to fuck with the stranger the same way that Saruman tortured Gandalf. The stranger manages to get a hold of the staff and obliterates the priestesses while shouting the words, "I'm good." Yeah, that's an actual line that Amazon paid someone to write. The staff is destroyed. The Harfoots return to the rest of their group, and Nori decides to travel to Rhûn with Gandalf. Yeah, he doesn't say it, but this is pretty much Gandalf. There are abundant clues just in this episode. The star constellation that he's following is called the Hermit's Hat. The priestesses call them an Istar, which means wizard. That energy that either destroyed or made up the priestesses looks like a moth, and if you remember from the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings films, Gandalf had a habit of talking to moths to get him out of trouble. He also remarks on the wind when trying to figure out which direction to go to when traveling to Rhûn, saying, "When in doubt, always follow your nose." This is more or less what Gandalf says to Pippin when they are lost in the mines of Moria in the Fellowship of the Ring. So if this guy turns out not to be Gandalf, either Amazon is working really hard to fuck with us, or this is one of the blue wizards. I've already talked about in previous videos about why it doesn't make sense for the stranger to be one of the Astari, let alone Gandalf, from a lore perspective. So I'm not going to repeat myself, but I will say that the fact that he's going to Rhûn makes even less sense for his character. Now for the moment almost no one has been waiting for. Halbrand is in fact Sauron, and they couldn't have been more on the nose about it too. They had the priestesses calling the stranger Sauron to throw us off, but it was such a poor misdirection. It was obvious that Halbrand was Sauron. It's been obvious practically since his introduction, but I've tried and tried to come up with other theories to delude myself because I didn't want it to be true. First off, he recovers from his wounds that he received in the last episode really damn quick. He kind of sidles into Celebrimbor's workshop and starts teaching him what's what. But he uses careful, subtle suggestions to convince Celebrimbor that he's coming up with all these ideas himself. They figure out that they need to stretch out the power of the one little piece of mithril, initially to make a crown, but then to make 2 rings. Why? Because Sauron wants Galadriel to be his queen so that they can rule Middle-earth together. Now, Galadriel started to become suspicious of Halbrand as soon as he started helping Celebrimbor, but after tracing his lineage, she figures it out for sure. Sauron tries all his mind games on her, and she's able to resist, but when she wakes up, she is alone, and Sauron has already fled. Right off the bat, I want to say that I hate this. I hate that Halbrand is Sauron. Ever since he showed up in Numenor, the signs have not been that subtle, but especially with the weird flirting between him and Galadriel, I really hoped that he wasn't Sauron. But let's take a second and look at this from a lore perspective. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 things that they get wrong. 1. In the books, Sauron instructed the elves in creating 19 rings. It was only after creating the 1 ring that the elves sensed his treachery and he fled Eregion. But in the show, he's already gone before they even make the first 3. 2. In the books, Celebrimbor was immediately suspicious of Sauron, or Anatar as he was known at that time. But in the show, he is more than happy to take Sauron's advice and has 0 suspicions of his character. And 3, this one has more to do with Galadriel's ring rather than Sauron, but in the books, Galadriel's ring is the only one that's known to be made of mithril, whereas in the show, all 3 of the elven rings are. Just plainly looking at the history of Sauron's character, it's pretty obvious that he is far too prideful to rule alongside someone. But honestly, I can't tell if Sauron was just trying to fool Galadriel or if he was being sincere. It also didn't make sense to me that Galadriel still suggested that they make the 3 rings, even though she has suspicions as to why they're really being made. Of course, I also wasn't expecting any of the Rings of Power to be created in Season 1, which makes me wonder if they're going to end each season by having a different race create their rings, leading up to Season 4 where Sauron creates the One Ring. So the 3 elven rings have been created, but we have to wait until Season 2 to see if Amazon sticks to the lore when it comes to who gets those rings. Sauron also fast travels to Mordor, and he seems fairly satisfied with himself. Of course, Adar is there with his orcs, so we'll have to wait until the next season to see what he does with him. In my previous reviews, and in my Who is Sauron theory video, I've put forward several theories about characters and the story, mainly pertaining to Mithril and the identity of Sauron. For instance, my original theory for the Mithril was that Sauron had already come to the elves and tricked them into acquiring Mithril so that he could use it to create the Rings of Power. Now, while they did end up using Mithril to create the Elven Rings, Sauron didn't show up until later, which makes the whole plot line of the elves dying without Mithril seem almost like filler. I also at various times theorized that the stranger was Gandalf and that Halbrand was Sauron, though I definitely provided other theories, mainly out of hope that I was wrong about both of them. So my theories weren't always 100% correct, but they weren't 100% wrong either. I just got a few details wrong here and there. But I will say I had been giving far too much credit to the writers this entire time. I'm going to binge the entire season to see if maybe the plot makes a little more sense, so wish me luck. Whether or not you've already commented on my Rings of Power videos, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about the finale as well as the season as a whole. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Also hit that notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.